We now close with additional evidence for the founders' intent to establish a secular, non-Christian government. Ed Buckner maintains that the United States Constitution, lacking affirmative references to religion, is the primary and sufficient evidence of the secular intent of our government's founders. The Treaty of Tripoli, written in 1796 by diplomat Joel Barlow and signed and proclaimed by President John Adams on June 10, 1779, adds considerable weight to the issue of the American government's secularism. The Treaty of Tripoli was drafted and signed less than 10 years after the Constitution's ratification. The beginning sentence of the document states unequivocally what religious fundamentalists seek to obliterate. The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Could you give me a definition of incorporation, because that wasn't clear to me in the talk?
It meant that what they did was that the states had to like follow whatever the like the First Amendment establishment and freedom of religion. They had to go along with most of the issues in the First Amendment and most of the other amendments. I believe actually, where did I put that?
So the word...
The basic Bill of Rights.
The Basic Bill of Rights, yeah.
And so to incorporate those into their own...
Into the
Yes.
state constitution.
Yeah, they had to do it. In other words, they had to like honor those things. I guess that there's still a few, I think that they haven't incorporated some things from the 7th, I think, and I forget, the 9th Amendment. Like you don't necessarily, not every state has to grant you, in civil cases, access to a jury trial. Depends on the state. And also, some states, they don't have to, they haven't read it, they haven't incorporated, or it hasn't been incorporated by, for all the states to like give you the right for a grand jury thing if you're accused of a crime, which I don't know is such a bad thing because they indict you usually when the prosecutor brings stuff. But anyway, yeah, almost everything else has been incorporated, but there's still a few things that have not been. Does that help?
Yes, it does. So
Okay.
it was really the 14th Amendment that's established that precedent.
Right,
of
yes
the-
it was, yeah.
Okay, good. And then I was just curious whether either one of you can answer this. Do you remember the 64 court ruling on the prayer in schools? Do you remember that being covered in the news? Or?
Oh yeah,
I was wondering.
oh yeah,
what-
so it was exciting, we
in
felt good
1964,
about it.
yeah.
Oh
heard
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
you mean
yeah.
the O'Hare.
It had
yeah.
a lot of coverage.
Oh yeah, it had
Oh,
a lot
yes.
of coverage.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, that was a landmark, we were very excited about
Yeah.
that. That and of course abortion rights
And
later.
then, but did the media really pan that, or what? You had mentioned that the media was unfair to.
Well, that was in
O'Hare.
Baltimore where, it began. So what did you think about the media coverage at the time?
I thought that it was kind of toned down a bit. It was, it was in the papers and so forth and so on, but around Baltimore and so forth, that they, and in general media, they kind of they were kind of derogatory toward
Oh, very.
O'Hara.
But were people forecasting this was going to be the downfall of the United States now that we didn't have prayer?
Yeah, there were people, but
Oh,
see,
yeah.
the unfortunate thing that it's hard for me to answer you on that because we were like active because Dimitri was still small in the Unitarian Church, and of course people there were very much for the secular side.
No, listen.
Right, because this is relevant to this. This is Catherine Stewart, who has written the book now that's now out. But this is an editorial she wrote in the New York Times a while back. Separation of Church and School by Catherine Stewart. From our apartment, you can see the front door of our children's public school. It's a bright red double door made of solid wood and framed in brown red brick. Last summer, I spent a lot of time looking at that door with anticipation and excitement. We had just moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan from California and had chosen the neighborhood for its school. On the second Sunday after classes started, happy and hectic, I glanced out the window and saw a large group of people gathered in front of the schoolhouse door. They had a table, brochures, a tray of lollipops, and a 4-foot-tall sign. It turned out they were part of an evangelical ministry and that our school was their church. See what's happening around this country? I decided to attend the service. Notice the names of the children on pieces of paper, the pastor advised his flock. I looked around and saw the posters the kids had made with their charming snapshots from summer holidays and rambling lists of likes and dislikes. Pray for them, the pastor continued. Pray that the families of this school will come to know Jesus and say this is a house of God. The pastor's daughter, a lively 8-year-old who attends a private Christian school, took me on a brief tour through parts of the school I had not yet seen. This is my dad's church, she enthused. After the service, I chatted with the pastor and asked how much it cost to rent the school. This is exactly what you were saying, Jim. Oh no, he said, we don't pay rent. New York is way too expensive. We just pay the custodian's fee. Mm-hmm. I learned that the church was using the school not just on Sunday mornings and evenings, but also on some Wednesday and Friday nights, and that it paid a pittance for the privilege. Far less than the nearly $100,000 that the PTA spent last year to renovate the restrooms the church members were using. Ours is one of at least 60 New York City schools that have doubled as rent-free houses of worship. The vast majority of them evangelical Christian churches in their off hours. Many have little connection with the school communities. It's hard to imagine, for example, that the village church at Public School 3 in the West Village, a church that runs a gender-affirming ministry endeavor associated with the movement to cure gay men and lesbians, is representative of the neighborhood. A number of the new churches are the work of national church planting organizations attracted to New York by the combination of cheap space and the opportunity to save the city from its apparent godlessness. Some are closely associated with national groups known for their hostility to government education. The church that meets at my daughter's school is associated with the movement that instructs its members to pray for a Christian reformation of American education and for the election of like-minded political leaders. In some communities, parents and school administrators have complained that representatives of the churches have made use of their proximity to students to approach children for religious purposes. Mm-hmm. A friend in Tribeca told me he was taken aback when his daughter asked him, "Daddy, is the church part of our school?"
Mm-hmm. See?
The situation originated in a 2001 decision, Good News Club versus Milford Central School, in which the United States Supreme Court appeared to suggest that keeping religious groups out of schools after hours amounted to discrimination against their religious views. Subsequent federal rulings effectively forced the city to open school doors to nearly any religious group that asked for the privilege. But since school facilities are often available only on Sundays, when sports teams and extracurricular clubs are less likely to need space, Jews and Muslims, for example, were mostly shut out. So anyway, the United States Court of Appeals has now ruled that schools can shut them out, as you noticed in my talk. So
Can shut out.
yeah,
they can shut them out.
That's for New York. Now we'll see what happens. You know.
So a precedent has been
The state
reset.
Supreme Court
Yeah.
Has been reset.
in our favor.
Yeah, well, they're the federal appeals court, so I don't think it's gone to the Supreme Court again.
Federal appeals.
Yeah. This is a weird situation, a weird legal situation.
So, but why wouldn't they just say, well, we'll rent it to anyone at the same rate that we rent it to the churches? We'll
Well,
offer it to anybody.
I guess you could. You could bring suit.
Bring your
if they
photography
would.
club.
Yeah, I guess you could bring suit.
But then
if
they
people
win,
want.
and the churches win, they say, well, see, now we get
Yeah,
our space, because who else is going to rent it?
yeah, yeah. I suppose atheists could run it. That would be a scream, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if we had people, it was interesting, you gave me that, are we in our discussion?
Yeah, we're in our discussion hour.
No,
Unless
no,
you're-
yeah, we
unless
just went
anybody's
to
got
discussion.
questions.
You said that 60% of the congregations have less than 100 members.
Yes, they do.
Isn't that incredible?
Chavez did a fantastic job with that. I mean, I was amazed when I was researching for all
Well,
this.
how are you going to service your community?
Yeah.
How are you going to service the poor? What kind of counseling things are
So
we
you
going to
know,
offer?
it's the big groups that probably can muster voters
Yeah.
to vote for these politicians. Because you notice
Yeah.
Obama hasn't rolled it back. People thought he would. He's expanded it.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting statistic.
Yeah, it's the bigger churches. They're just not performing. Actually, you know what he said? Most of them are performing. I didn't want to like keep going on that, but I read some of the things, and he said that actually what most of them are doing are like cultural things, not really cultural, but like plays describing, you know, their worship things and things like that. And he said actually churches are one of the last places in the United States where people sing together. I thought that was fascinating, but they're not doing social service programs, except maybe for members of their own congregation.
One comment I have is, I learned this from Sean Faircloth, is that the church preschools are entirely exempt from any health and safety regulations that would apply to
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
public
Yes.
preschool.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Even a secular preschool.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And they are stringent.
I bet, you must know.
I went through that. Matter of fact, we were setting up a preschool at Webster Elementary as an adjunct to the building. The Board of Education gave the space, and it was going to be a board program. But my goodness, the sinks, the toilets, oh my, on and on and on, and it took all summer to get that thing squared around. So
Well, also if you set one up in your house too, I mean,
Oh,
it's
you have
very
to.
difficult.
Right.
and you have to have facilities to provide food, and then you're into the
Then
food
you're into
department,
the
the
food, the health
sanitation.
yes.
Department of Health has to come in and make sure that you're meeting those requirements. It is hard, but the churches are exempt from that.
This is
Isn't
amazing.
that great?
Yeah.
Very sad.
Enjoy your next meal that you buy out there that's served in the parking lot at the church.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we had some good food from.
However,
When the ladies would have, it was one of Jim's schools, and they'd have these great sweet potato pies.
Sweet
These
potato
little-
pies.
They had them left over, they'd come to the school and sell them. From their and they were
made at
good.
the church. However, they were good, but however, you don't know how many bacteria you were taking on.
We
You were
sur-
supporting the church.
Yeah, unfortunately, but we
and
were
then all of a
also
sudden you're
pigs.
supporting the church.
We were young and hungry.
Young and hungry, we didn't pay too much attention.
Yeah. And when I was in high school, they had Campus Crusade. And, you know, I knew it was after school. I don't know whether it was actually being held on campus or they went to a church, but they were recruiting people for this Campus Crusade in the high school. I saw other high school students, my peers, handing out information, trying to get their friends to come to Campus Crusade after school.
Wasn't that didn't that ultimately become like to convert Muslims or something? I
Well,
thought that the college campus crusade movement now is or something.
Well, at the time, you know, it was
was just-
Born Again, or it was even maybe before the Born Again. Do you remember the I Found It bumper stickers?
No.
The I Found It was I found new life through Jesus Christ.
No.
Now, maybe this was just in California, but they had bumper stickers that were immensely popular, yellow and black. It said, I found it. That's all it said. And, you know, it was before the
You were
web.
supposed to ask, what did they find?
But, yeah, it was like, what would Jesus do? This was the same sort of pop church culture.
Yeah.
And I found it was this idea that we're going to become born again, that you know, we're going to find people who need religion, and they're going to find it. Now the Jews had their counterattack, and so they started handing out bumper stickers, "We never lost it."
Oh, come on, that's cool, that's funny. That's kind of funny. It's clever.
But I didn't give me, the real troubling part of me is that I didn't even give it a pause. It's like, what the hell is going on here in this public school that they're handing out this information, they're recruiting kids on campus for this campus crusade. Now they may have defended themselves and saying, well, we just let the students do it. But it was really odd looking back on it, you know, and I didn't realize how odd it
The
was.
stuff's always on the edge. Well, no, because you're running around, you're studying, you're trying to do your social life, you've got tests, you've got like life on your hands, so we don't think about those things, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I just let it pass. Certainly wasn't interested. I knew it was Jesus that they were talking about. But, you know, today, I would have certainly have spoke up and said something.
Yeah, but see, like, we're all a lot smarter. I mean, I can remember even when we were Unitarians and we were, you know, pretty secular, I can remember the stupid idiots in the hallway with, like, Jesus loves you. They were always handing out those smiley faces then. That was about,
Yeah, that was a
about
campaign
the
at one point,
70s, I
yeah.
think, yeah.
Yeah.
And it used to enrage me because I was like, in a bad mood, I'd have an exam or something, you know, and I'd tell them, you know, like, don't give me that stuff, you
And
know.
this was at the Unitarian.
No, this was at Wayne State.
Wayne State.
College,
Right from the
yeah.
goddamn halls, you know? I didn't think to actually, you know, like, you know, like, I don't know, could you complain? You probably could have. I just was pissed, you know, because the communists were handing out stuff, the Christians were handing out stuff. I mean, you you just got to the point where it's like, you know, don't hand me anything,
Stop.
you know, stop.
Stop handing me
that
stuff.
kind of thing, you know.
And, you know, I think something really happened in the history of these court cases between trying to keep, you know, religion in the government, which was really, you know, prior to the United States, religion was already in the government, to where we are today, where they're trying to get back in.
Yeah.
Yes.
That they've,
Yes,
Christians
definitely.
have now have configured themselves, have reimagined themselves as the victims of the courts.
Beautiful,
That they've
yeah.
gone, you know, that they are now being persecuted and that they've been kicked out of the schools, and now they're trying to play the victim card and come back in, right?
Well, that's a great point, Norm. Yeah, I
Excellent.
think that's what I was trying to show somewhat, you know. I mean, I was trying to show how much they have, like, penetrated the wall of church and state, and how the Supreme Court is almost in league with them, some of the justices, at least. And, I mean, how crazy they are. I mean, I think, you know, when they're talking about, when Thomas talks about that you can establish a state religion in the state, like, in other words, if Michigan wanted to establish, I mean, I know it's not gonna fly, but think about, like, a Supreme Court justice saying this?
Well, Kennedy's right behind him.
Well, yeah, Kennedy is close there, but I mean, I think Thomas is the most,
Adamant.
you know, adamant, and he's
Yeah.
like nuts, you know.
Yeah.
I understand he doesn't even really write his opinions, so, you know, I mean, I think he's kind of an idiot. I think most of them have their,
Staff.
what do you call them, their aides, their
Aides,
interns,
yeah.
or whatever, the.
Interns, or whatever.
Clerks.
That's, the clerks, that's, I read
Thank
that
you,
they do
Dawn.
most of the
Clerks
shit,
is the
thank
right
you.
way.
But now I lost my train of thought about the making themselves victims. Oh, that's the thing, I think that the secular community, probably because we don't have enough money or not enough unification, I don't know what it is, but I think we've done really a piss poor job in turning back that idea. Because I think most Americans now, I'm not sure, I don't know, I haven't seen any stats, but a lot of Americans, I think this was a Christian nation. And Bill O'Reilly is always on Fox doing that shit. It's continuous. I can't believe some of the things that once in a while I hear, because I don't like watch them very much.
You have to re-educate.
I think a lot of Americans think that. I mean, how do you turn that back? I mean, we haven't done a very good job.
No, we have not.
They've got more money. I think they've got command of some of the, you
But
know.
in some ways, isn't the genie already out of the bottle? Is that you're really not gonna go back, you know, to 1940 and get what was? I don't see that happening. They're not gonna be able to go back to where they were, but they can sort of inch their way a little bit by
That's what they're
playing the
doing.
victim and saying, well, you've gone too far, you're interfering with my religion.
Right,
Mhm.
yeah, right.
But that's a defensive measure, whereas in the past, it was almost taken for granted that they could be in the schools.
But isn't it clever though? I mean, the way they're approaching it?
I remember in public
I find it
school,
very clever.
bowing my head
And
in the
saying Lord's
30s
Prayer.
and 40s.
Oh,
I hate
no,
to
I
give
don't
away my
remember
age, but in the 30s and 40s,
Isn't that funny? You know, I grew up in
give the
a,
Pledge of Allegiance and you kind of bow your head for, you know.
but they didn't have God then at the time.
I'm not talking, that's the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance is given, and then you remain standing,
Oh,
and you
wow.
bow your head, you know.
And somebody said something? Somebody
Well,
read a
no, you're
prayer?
supposed to think of God.
Or you just think of God, so it wasn't directed.
No, you weren't being directed.
Well, that's good. My father said that he had to recite the Lord's Prayer. And this was in Connecticut. You lived in Connecticut.
I do not doubt that. I went to a school, it's a private school. And it's Mooseheart. And it was for Moose Club members
Yeah.
whose decease
Yeah.
and the father deceases or the mother deceases.
In Illinois?
Hmm?
Was this in Illinois?
The Moose Club in
Yeah.
the Moose Heart in Illinois,
I've
yes.
heard of them. I'd
The
like to
city,
hear more
yeah.
about that.
Like
Yeah.
the Boys City or what, or Boys Town or something like that, in Iowa or Kansas, wherever Boys Town is.
But this was
Ours is in Illinois, and that's where the Moose Club had built this campus. It's enormous, very large. And I was there for 7 years or 8 years, 7 or 8 years. And at no time during the school hours did I get, now let's bow our heads. We had a Protestant chaplain and a Catholic chaplain. And they both used the same facility. Well, anyway. And the Mass was in the same place. The Mass was first, and then the Protestant service was at the usual time, 10 o'clock. As most services are, Protestant services. And at no time in all those years was I reminded, God does this, God does that. It was all straight English, straight math, straight science, straight this, straight that. And because the Catholics did not want the interference, and the Protestants did not want the interference, and they thought that it was best handled by themselves.
It was so nice in this country. I can remember where you weren't supposed to really discuss like religion, politics too, they would say, but especially religion. And people didn't. I grew up in a Methodist town. It was a very strong Methodist, and there were a lot of Catholics and things like that, and people just didn't discuss religion a lot. They really didn't, unless you went, to a private school like I did with, with the nuns and stuff. But people didn't discuss religion in the public schools. I never remember any kind of religion in the public schools. And I do remember being taught about the separation of church and state. And Dimitri remembers, but I don't think the kids are hardly taught anything like that now. I'd like to see what they're taught now.
Yeah.
So, but the Catholics and the Protestants were afraid of each other.
Right.
One of them might get the upper hand if they started to
Well,
put it in the schools.
isn't that the point?
That's the
of
point.
like this
Keep it
country where
separate.
nobody
Keep it out
was
of the-
allowed to
keep it
get
out of
the
the
upper
public
hand,
sphere.
as it were.
Yeah, they weren't worried about the atheists.
Yeah, no.
They were just, they knew that their own self-interests were, so something has changed. I think as the Protestants became more vocal,
Yeah.
the Catholics became disinterested in the battle.
Yeah.
So that's where we are today.
I have a tangent. Progress. On the corner of Gratiot Avenue and 8 Mile, you're going into East Point, Michigan. And on that corner, where it's a island, it's a boulevard. Gratiot's a boulevard at that point. And at that point, right there where it says East Point, every year, at this time of year, there used to be the 3 shepherds, some shepherds, and the manger and something like that, sponsored by God knows who. No more. This year and the year before, I especially noticed it this year, it's commercial. There's Christmas presents with bows on, giant, oversized things.
Maybe Wendy
There's
took care of
secular.
it.
Maybe Wendy.
Maybe Wendy.
Yeah.
It's pure secular
Pure secular. It's,
at that point.
But it would be city property there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Welcome to East Point.
Yeah.
And now
You,
it's secular.
Well, as soon as somebody brings a lawsuit, a lot of these communities
They
now,
back
they don't
down.
want to spend the money.
They backed up.
Depends on how much money the community has.
you didn't mention those cases in your talk about the
No.
public square, about the.
No,
There's
I just mentioned them, like with a lot of this comes from the McCollum case, actually. That kind of thing, religious displays. That's another, that's another facet. That was an important case,
Very
it
important.
really was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was lost in history. I think,
Yeah,
well,
although she served in a lot of the humanist associations
Well, she-
till she got pretty old. Yeah, she was like president of this and the president of that. When I looked her up and, yeah, her son had written the thing actually, the one that's a lawyer. He was a younger son than the one that was like harassed. And yeah, he wrote a very interesting, thing. And he also speaks during the documentary, and he's very eloquent.
He's still alive.
Yeah, I think they all are. I think the one son didn't want to take part in it, but the older one talked a little bit. But this younger one that's a lawyer is, of course, naturally very verbal, and he really goes at it. And he explained the case very well, and he did also in the Encyclopedia of Unbelief. He wrote that section. So she served for a long time in humanist organizations and in secular organizations. But she was very old. She was still alive when they made the documentary, like in a nursing home, very old. And then she died, very shortly after. But she was very old. Very beautiful woman when she was young. Very beautiful, What a shame. Very fiery, I think, too. But God, I don't know if I would have put my son through that. I really don't know. That's always a hard decision.
Yes, it is.
What do you do? I mean, the kid's being beaten up, and it's also in fights.
And the Noodle Case comes to mind too,
Oh,
because, he was dismissed for lack of standing.
Right, that was they punted.
Yeah, they punted, so, his daughter was the one that was supposedly he was trying to represent.
If all we need is one atheist to bring it that actually has, what is it
Standing.
called?
Custodian.
Custodian, yeah, custodian.
Well,
Yeah.
the standing in the case.
Yeah.
He has to have standing.
Well,
in
you
the
have to
case.
have custody of the child.
Well, custody of the child, well, some way or another, you have to have standing.
It's too bad it was Newdown,
Yeah. And then, the People for the American Way, I guess it's the president is going to be speaking at the
Right,
Michigan Atheist.
right, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that, because they're big on the free speech side of it. They're not atheists, but
Yeah, I think a lot of them are though, I think pretty
they're
much.
very big on, free speech, First Amendment issues.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
So that'll be interesting. Did the press play then a negative role in all of this? You think that the American media really didn't help the cause of separation? You think that they were more on the side of the churches?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, I
do.
think even though they weren't explicit, like we stand for the churches, it's implied.
Even in like the New York Times sometimes, I think I told you, or I'm pretty sure I did. I can't remember the name of it. She's some intellectual. She writes for different journals. She's a writer, and she wrote something a number of years, maybe 10, 12 years ago, saying that, Christianity was, Christian myth was comparable to the other myths and everything. I was very explicit about it, And they wrote back and they told her that, she would have to change that, those sentences.
Where did she write this?
She wrote this for the New York Times.
And they told her she had to change it?
Yes, they suggested that she change it because they said it was disrespectful to religion. And she refused to, and they didn't run her story.
That's just like New York Times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to upset.
They
the
also,
audience.
when Martin Luther King was jailed and he wrote that famous letter, they did refuse to print it.
Isn't that terrible?
So, when a publication that's supposed to be like kind of liberal
And
kind of,
representative.
certainly is supposed to give you both sides of the issue, and if they don't do it, what do you think all the local things are gonna do?
Especially the Detroit News.
Yeah, like the Detroit News, the Free Press, I mean, I think most
Most local.
local
Most local.
things are, like
Yeah.
with the establishment, they don't like to criticize religion. I think,
don't
don't
have
you
the
think
guts.
that they've aided
Yeah.
and abetted this?
Well,
Yeah.
you've seen the Saturday and the Sunday ads in the newspapers, they take up a lot of ad space. They pay for that. That's not free.
For churches? Or?
Yes,
Yeah.
they pay for that. And then that's
Yeah.
a
Well, that's
revenue.
another point, yeah, that
It's
they
revenue
pay.
for the papers.
Yeah, they don't wanna turn them off so that they'll stop, yeah, they have money and we don't.
Yeah.
This doesn't help us,
No.
They have buying power and we
Yeah.
don't.
We don't have the Koch brothers, or whatever they're called.
But you know what, it's like, the gays, they put forward a really smart campaign, I think, where, they were better educated and they spent money. They went out and people knew that they spent money on stuff.
You mean that they had economic power?
Right,
Yes.
right, and you know what, that always pays off in this country, and
Yeah.
aren't we better educated?
No, we're better
I wonder
educated.
what kind of buying power we might have.
That,
as a group.
it comes
The
out in the
secular-
surveys, in demographics, for example, in the Atheist Scholar, .org. It shows, in demographics, it shows that atheists are better educated. Their average income is above the average income of the United States, always.
Why can't we
Why
launch the
can't we
campaign
gather
like the
that-
gays did? The gays were real smart.
That's energy. There's
I mean-
financial energy and there's intellectual energy.
When
Why
a
aren't we doing
capitalist
it?
country hears that people are spending money, like buying things, they automatically start getting a better view of them. Have you ever noticed that? And they keep up their property. I mean, when we moved to West Village, and I knew people in Indian Village, that's when I heard from a lot of the bourgeois people. They're not, admittedly, they were better educated and had higher incomes, but they always said that the gays, during the riots, that the gays saved Indian Village.
Is that right?
Yeah, because, they kept up their property, they stayed put, and they kept everything nice, and it was, when things died down, then people were ready to come back, and it was a nice community. And that's what you heard all the time, the gays saved Indian Village, the gays saved Indian Village. Those people like the gays, They don't like us.
Well, I don't think we're as cohesive or as identifiable as
Mhm.
gays would be, and that the discrimination is much more explicit, has been explicit, against gays than against atheists, So I don't think that the analogy is very strong there. But that's a challenge. I don't know what to do about that. That's a problem.
It is
because,
a big challenge. Yes, it is.
we're not as, if we were discriminated against more, it might actually be
Better?
to drive us together.
Together,
The
yeah.
persecution unites, a lack of
Yeah.
persecution divides, actually.
Hmm.
But that's what Tracy Martin, she said why she had gotten involved, because she wanted to fight the discrimination against atheism and atheists. She wasn't so much concerned about spreading atheism or educating people about atheism, but that she wanted to push back, the religious right. So people have to have something to push against. And if they don't feel directly discriminated against, then they don't push back. They don't give their money to these causes.
I know how she feels.
It has to
yeah.
be stronger than a once-a-month meeting at a beer and wine joint
Yeah,
With-
or steak
with
joint, yeah.
Peanuts on the floor.
Yeah,
It's got
Crunch,
to be a little
crunch.
bit,
that was a bad sign. I should have known.
a little bit stronger.
Than the peanuts, yeah.
Because when we get into a situation like that, we just tend to sit around and, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, and you don't do anything, you just say, oh yeah. I understand what you're saying, oh, I went through some of that myself, oh yeah, oh yeah. So then the person goes out in another month, they put up with crap from the general population, they come back and they say, oh yeah, oh yeah. you know.
Yeah.
Well, it got worse, after you left. I mean, things were going downhill in terms of the 3 minutes that everyone was
Oh, God, these 3 minutes.
spending. It's just
Okay,
unfortunate.
all right. Before we go there too deeply, we're recording.
Okay.
And we now have one of the most interesting discussions that I've ever, seen for a while. Excuse me, not ever seen, that I participated in any degree at all in a long time. And I really appreciate it. But right now, we have to check with the owners
Okay.
and see what our
No,
thing.
we're good, they said we're good until 10.
Oh, good
actually.
until 10?
I think we should probably be out by a quarter so that they
Yeah.
can clean it up a little
Yeah.
They
bit.
close at 10?
Yeah, but they
Yeah.
have us down 7 to 10, 7 to 10. I
Oh,
think
7 to
we're
10?
supposed to be 7 to 9,
But
but nobody's gonna
it
take
says 7 to
it.
10?
But nobody's gonna take it after, who's gonna come in at
After
9
9,
o'clock?
okay, all right.
So, yeah, we
Oh,
are
I'm so
allowed-
sorry. Well, please,
Yeah,
well,
we
then
are allowed to
excuse
sit
me for
here
a second,
until
I'll be right
probably, I
back.
would think quarter to 10 would be,
Oh.
Well, one more comment on the material, and then I guess we can drift into something else. But the anti-circumcision measure in California, in San Francisco, was this
Yes.
was beaten back because they said, well, we parents have religious freedom that's protected by the Constitution
That's the trouble,
to say we can circumcise.
that's the trouble.
And that's the voice that was heard, not that, that boys have also religious freedom to choose their religion. it was the parents.
Well, that's what I did because when I was doing Atheist Scholar, it was like the books that were important, which I still think that maybe we're not paying enough attention to.
The actual books.
Yeah, because we
But-
were like, we were focused on the book, and that's the important thing, I think. I mean, like, where do you start? I mean, everybody reads Dawkins and everybody reads blah, 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 but this heavy stuff is, sometimes they throw it on the web, you'll find it on a thing, but it's not broken down.
Well, that's why we exist.
John Loftus does a little bit. He has a list up on Amazon and I think on his blog, but definitely on Amazon. But I looked at those and a lot of them are kind of idiosyncratic. Some he covers very well, he reviews very well, others are not so good. They're not like in categories really like this. You were right about this. I don't think hardly anything exists like this.
On atheism and law?
With the
or-
discussing the bibs,
Yeah.
having a bib where you discuss the books.
Yeah, because if we were just gonna read the books, we don't really need a group, right?
Yeah.
Or we can just sit at home.
Yeah,
So I think that the value of having a lecture, having the YouTube video, is that you're giving this distillation of the best information to be had in these books. Not to say don't read the books, but here is a distillation, here is a abstract, cliff notes, if you will,
Yeah.
on the.
yeah, but
on the
it
book.
is Cliff Notes, really.
Really?
But that's
Not
okay,
reading
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but we don't, that doesn't mean we're experts after that. But I liked how you kept referring back to the website, so you could see this on Atheist Scholar. I
Yeah.
really like that.
Yeah.
Because that's
yeah.
what's gonna get people
Frequently.
to use the
I
website.
hope so, yeah.
To continue it, and it's leveraging everything that we've done with the meetup and the website, now the YouTube, it'll all be useful. Whether
And,
it's-
and in the title panels and in the credit roll at the end, that is, all those sites are mentioned,
Yeah,
they're shown.
yeah, I did reply to your.
I'm glad you
you
wanted
did.
to be on it, I
Thank you
wasn't
very-
sure.
On
Okay.
YouTube? No, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I
I'm not
wanted
negative.
to.
I wanted to say, so this was about 6 or 8 years ago, I wrote to Robert Sedler, who is the constitutional law professor at Wayne State. He's very well
I
known.
don't remember him.
And when the local media wants a constitutional law quote, they'll go to Robert
I
Sedler.
didn't know that.
And so I wrote to, because he had done an editorial about, maybe it was about priest abuse in the Free Press. And I wrote to him, I said, another abuse is the abuse of boys, Jewish boys, getting circumcised for religious reasons. And there's no reason, no constitutional excuse for this. And he was very defensive. I'll show you he said, oh
Oh, I
no,
wanna see it.
that it's protected by the First Amendment. Decision is protected by the First Amendment.
How about children's rights?
Yeah, and that he dismissed that completely. I sent him a lot of background material. He said he would gladly file it, but he completely disagrees with my point, and that any challenge would be struck down because that religious rights, the religious rights.
Then what are you gonna
of
do with the
First Amendment.
Muslims and their
So,
right to
yeah.
circumcise the girls?
He's a Jewish man, by the way.
Yeah, how about
So-
the Muslims then?
Oh, the
They could
Muslims
bring
and the
some,
circumcision
I
of the
don't think
girls.
that they will, because I think they're scared to, but how
Yeah.
about
It's
circumcising
never-
girls?
Yeah, it's never been challenged, in the courts, but
I
it
mean, what
does
if they
say
just take off a little part of the clitoris, say?
custom or belief. The law already excludes
Yeah, it's
custom or
against the
belief
law.
of the parents is not an excuse for the female circumcision. But that's never been brought to court.
The New York Times has been pressing for, at the airports and stuff, for people to be able to ask for help and make it against the law to take children out of the country, the
Yeah.
girls to be circumcised, and have it posted, in people's languages at the airports, so that maybe they can prevent it. Nothing about the boys though, because the New York Times is always playing to their Jewish clientele.
Yeah. So, it goes back to this history that you went over, Mary, is that it has to be the culture that's changing, the society. As society itself becomes less religious and more educated,
Yeah.
more secular, that's when the court cases will be decided in our favor.
Yeah, and that's when they were in the 60s and the 70s, when things were a little more secular. And then you notice things have swung back
Now
now.
we've swung back.
But that is all, to me, that's all backlash, that's all defensive
Yeah,
posturing.
I think it is.
That isn't a return to the way it was.
No,
That's just a struggle to cling on.
yeah.
Dover is a better, I think, a better example of the future,
Boy, I
is
hope
that,
so.
you know, the courts are gonna see through this and say, you know, you're really just trying to
Yeah,
promote
but you know, it
religion.
depends on the judge. What if there had been a Clarence Thomas on there?
You know, I take the long view. I mean, you're right in the short term, the 5-4 balance in the court could easily be swung the other way. But see how divided they are as well. you
Yeah,
know.
but Ginsburg's gonna die one of these days. She's got like pancreatic cancer. I mean, she's like, you know, it's amazing she's hung on.
She's
this
still
long.
there.
Yeah, and she won't fucking resign, so Obama can appoint another liberal judge. We're gonna have all these like Christian like judges. Of course, that's not true, because who started out? Souter started out as very conservative and ended up like, you know, like
And
making the right decision. So
this
you
is
never,
common.
actually, they say you don't know. You don't know when
You
you
don't know
appoint
what's
somebody.
gonna-
But they
what
do
they'll-
seem to
what they'll
become
turn
more
out.
progressive as time goes on, as they sit on the court.
Except for Thomas and
It
Scalia.
gets worse.
They've gotten
Scalia got
worse.
Okay.
And I think maybe Kennedy's gotten a little worse
He's
too.
kind
He's
of
getting
slipped.
senile, I
Yeah,
think.
he's not,
There was something I wanted to ask you about one of those cases then, was that the one, this Lutheran lawsuit, this is a local,
It's
Isn't
us.
this interesting?
That's here in Michigan.
The
here in
New York
Michigan.
Times has been covering it though.
when are they gonna announce the verdict on that?
I think that the decision won't come up till summer.
Summer, it takes
Yeah,
that long,
more
2012.
than, yeah, it takes a long time. They
But
had the oral arguments, probably sometime like spring or summer.
I did hear that case on NPR.
Oh, great. What did they say?
Nina Totenberg. I think it's Redford, it was Redford, Michigan.
Ah,
I think it was Redford.
Okay, I didn't, okay, go ahead.
So, okay, so I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll be a good local angle for us if we wanted to write an editorial to one of the papers,
Yeah,
you know, since it is here in Michigan.
that would be.
yeah.
With our discussion then?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
gossip.
Thank you very much, Mary.
All right, thank
Hey,
you.
thank you